Religion, Chapter 2, Bertrand Russell's Best. With the publication of 1903 of Lord Russell's now celebrated essay, A Free Man's Worship, his views on religion were followed avidly by most writers on this subject. In fact, this one essay became a classic and one of the most quoted in 20th century literature. His views on religion remained the same since he was 15 years old, but the evidence for belief in traditional religious dogma has never undergone any great changes either, in spite of apologetics for ecumenical reform. Lord Russell was a patient man. He never opposed those for whom mythology is a cultural characteristic. He did, however, repeatedly attack those who adopted various psychological and physical means of persecuting their opponents in propagating their myths. The history of organized religion in the West affords a number of instances in which religion has opposed humanitarian and scientific progress. A number of advances in medicine, for example, would have been achieved sooner if free inquiry has been common and orthodox thinking habits had been rare. Only a few centuries ago, there were many who believed that certain diseases were caused by sin and that it was a good that wicked should suffer for their sins. Anyone who dared suggest some other cause of these diseases was subject to various forms of censorship. People in Western countries are not burnt at the stake for disagreeing with prevailing religious dogma as they were in former times, but they are still subject to other more defined forms of unkindness. The psychological impact of religious minorities, especially on the younger members of these groups, of being merely tolerated by the majority group is a case in point. Agnostics, for instance, are not always entirely free to admit their beliefs publicly without suffering some kind of unpleasant consequences. In some cases, this may mean discrimination in obtaining employment by one who is otherwise fully qualified, while in other cases, it may mean a little loss in standing or kneeling in a community if it were known that one confessed the final sin, not believing in God. Those who claim with triumphant rhetoric that religious freedom is a necessary condition for a democratic culture, however large or small, sometimes forget that tolerance means more than a concordance between the adherents of rival creeds. Religious liberty, we were told, is something to cherish, but this ideal ought to be extended to those who profess no dogma whatever. It should be observed that ecumenical councils have been somewhat disappointing in bringing Christians together in loving embrace. Even in the Roman Catholic Church, which has celebrated a long history of persecution of other Christians, right and left wing groups now battle to find out its celibacy is as virtuous as was once supposed. Since the beginning of human events, religion has in various manifestations dominated man's conscious effort to make some kind of sense out of his sudden adventure into what he has always considered the unknown. Lord Russell never faltered, however, from his belief that religion has done more harm than good, as the pages of repeated history reveal. In his book, Why I Am Not a Christian, he reaffirmed his basic conviction that all religions are both harmful and untrue. Religion, if it is not to be harmful, must be free of dangerous elements, suspicion, fear, and hate, which lead step by step to escalate organized persecution. The selection which follows illustrate that he wasted no time in performing open surgery on man's religious myths. He found some absurdities which has now seem almost incredible in sharp satires Let us look at some puzzling illustration. Some are still puzzling. I observe that a very large portion of the human race does not believe in God and suffers no visible punishment in consequence. And if there were a God, I think it were very unlikely that he would have much an uneasy vanity as to be offended by those who doubt his existence. Although we are taught the Copernican astronomy in our textbooks, it has not yet penetrated to our religion or our morals and has not even succeeded in destroying belief in astrology. People still think that the divine plan has a special reference to human beings and that a special providence not only looks after the good but also punishes the wicked. I am sometimes shocked by the blasphemies of those who think themselves pious. For instance, the nuns who never take a bath without wearing a bathrobe all the time. When asked why, since no man can see them, they reply, "Oh, but you forget the good God." Apparently, they conceive of the